So, if at any point you thought The Batman was not a decent series, or even, should I say, good, well, stop watching this immediately because I am about to gush about how much I actually really love this series. No joke, I actually really enjoyed it. And I'm gonna be clear, when it started, I wasn't really that interested. Batman, early in his career, only been Batman for about 3 years or so. So it's still kind of a bit of a, not so much a myth, but it's more along the lines of people know about him. Very few people have actually seen him. So he's not the same seasoned Batman we saw in Batman the Animated Series, where it was obvious he had been doing the Batman thing for a hot minute. And also, I'm gonna be real as well, a lot of the gadgets, they were just toys. They were toys. They lit up this cool blue look. They looked very overly futuristic and honestly kind of plasticky. Even the Batmobile looked like a plastic toy in and of itself, which made sense once you saw the actual plastic toy Batmobile. Like, every time he pulled out a gadget or a new suit, you could hear something screaming off in the distance, buy the toy, buy the toy, buy a toy. It was very apparent. Let's not be non-transparent about this. It was about selling toys, but it did it so well. And when you had a lot of the same people who worked on Jackie Chan Adventures in it, the action was, oh, so good. It was so good. I loved the combat in this series, and it was really one of the selling points because a lot of things about this series was very watered down in comparison to Batman the Animated Series, but I mean, it was Batman the Animated Series. That pushed the envelope in terms of a lot of the grit you could get away with in terms of a child's television series. But this, it took itself seriously enough, I want to say, that I really enjoyed it. Now, don't get me wrong, I was about 14 when this came out, so the action was really the thing that appealed to a teenage me, and I was really kind of digging it. And I love the two police officers who were ordered to try to track him down, Ethan Bennett and Ellen Yin. And it was fascinating because we never really got so much of that angle of the police. I mean, by the time we get to the actual Batman the Animated series, he's already kind of working with the police for the most part. But here it's just like they've been tasked to bring in the Batman, and they're always conflicted with Ethan being very soft on Batman, and Ellen Yin, she tries to bring him in at every possible turn, but every moment she would actually get to do it, something comes up. Either there's a situation only he could actually stop, or she's just moments away from full-on cuffing him. I loved a lot of those nice little moments because you don't really get enough of that in a lot of Batman series. Oddly enough, like seriously, it was one of the first Batman series that really got to the whole situation of Batman is a vigilante, and there are those who need to bring him in because of that, but there's the situation of should we actually do this because he does a lot of good for the community. Not to mention Ellen Yin, voiced by Ming-Na Wen. Mulan, dude, Ming-Na Wen is a fucking legend. She's a goddamn legend. I loved it. And even the voice of Batman was actually pretty good. Reno Romano, he did a young Batman, and when he played the Bruce Wayne, he kind of brought it back a little bit, played it kind of on the young end, sounded like a convincing playboy, but when he got serious and kind of gruff, it's just like, oh, okay, he's no Conroy, but he's fairly decent at this job. Like, he really kind of pulls it off. Now, some of the design choices were kind of weird in certain places. And, like, what they did with the Joker, it was a choice, but it kind of grew on me when I actually saw him kung fu fighting Batman, and I'm just like, oh shit, a Joker who's actually a formidable fighter? I'm kinda digging it. And I love the long straight jacket and sleeves that he originally had, and the weird nature of his design. Like, he looked like a deranged clown. Like, there was always something about how Joker was portrayed before that he always felt a little too put together for you to call him insane. I mean, he always felt a little too good at planning for him just to be insane. This Joker, he was insane. He was off his meds, out of his mind, insane. And I mean, Kevin Michael Richardson giving him this deep voice. It was wild. It was weird. It was wacky. And it was just kind of fun. The Penguin, voiced by Tom Kenny, also, it was a choice, but I mean, Kung Fu fighting Penguin? I'm kind of digging that as well. It's actually pretty fun. Catwoman, her costume always felt a little weird to me, but I can't remember. I think the goggles, the oversized goggles, were already a thing in the comics before you got to this design, but the goggles, the oversized collar, the red gloves, I mean, I don't know. It worked in certain situations, and then other situations it was kind of weird. It was a hit or miss kind of thing with me. But that was actually pretty good. Mr. Freeze, voiced by Clancy Brown. I delighted in the design because it was just so odd a choice. You know, the skinniness, but he looked bulky because of the suit and the way the helmet of the suit was like shaped in an iceberg, and all you saw was the red glow of his eyes, and they took him back to his jewel thief roots. It was kind of fun, and Firefly, voiced by James Marsden, was probably the one of the most coolest designs for Firefly, honestly. And I love the episode where Firefly and Mr. Freeze teamed up. It was pretty cool. You had the ventriloquist and Scarface, voiced by Dan Castellaneta, like friggin' Homer Simpson as a villain in Batman. Pretty cool. And the reworked Scarface design was a little on the nose, I'm gonna be real, but I kinda dug it. Man Bat, it was okay. I mean, it's just Man Bat. Clue Master. Yo, you actually got Clue Master in this. And it was weird because they made him an obese guy. And it was a shame because it's just like, you could have got Stephanie Brown out of that. You could have gotten Spoiler in this series. You had Clue Master. What a shame. And Bane. Ooh, Bane. He wasn't buff in his non-venomized form. He was this skinny ass looking guy who was fairly competent at martial arts. But when he took the venom, he basically became the Red Hulk. He just became the Red Hulk, and it was such a wild departure. But I always remember the episode that introduced Bane because Batman got his absolute shit wrecked. Bane took the fuck over the city. Like, Bane just dominated him. And Batman just had to keep building bigger and better in order to overcome Bane because he just couldn't beat the sheer strength. He could not handle the man's girth. And it was actually kind of fun. I really kind of enjoyed it. And once you got to the end of the season, where Detective Bennett gets captured by the Joker, is mutated into Clayface, and has his whole life ruined, is forced into hiding, and it's only through that Yin ends up joining, well, forming an alliance of sorts with Batman. It was a brutal end to the season because it's just like one of these characters who Ethan was the best friend of Bruce. That was the thing. Ethan was the best friend of Bruce. And to have him basically have a kind of Two-Face like origin, he basically became, Bruce's Two-Face. And it made the situation between Batman and the Joker very personal because he ruined the life of one of Batman's best friends. And it was just and Batman throughout the rest of the series is constantly trying to help Ethan, who is just gone into this just loner recluse and desperate state by the end of the season. It was really messed up. It really was. And I remember that, and I remember just being so completely taken aback because it didn't get resolved by the end of things. Like, everything that went on with Ethan was just really tragic and sad. And then you got to the second season where a lot of the stuff that happened with Yin and the original police chief, Chief Rojas, kind of comes to a head as Rojas uncovers that Yin and Batman have been working together. He tries to bring her in for her involvement with Batman, but then you get James Gordon who comes in and just is just like, no. The good that comes from working with Batman outweighs the bad, especially once he captures Joker, Penguin, and Riddler all around the same time. It was some pretty good stuff, and I really enjoyed it by the end of the season. I loved having Jim Gordon. You also got a lot of other characters, like more minor kind of characters to a certain degree, but you got Ragdoll, who, I mean, was okay. The Riddler, who he was an interesting design choice, and some of the riddles he had were actually pretty fun. I know a lot of people love the Batman the Animated Series Riddler, but this Riddler, the riddles and the way he went about those riddles were a little bit more fascinating to me. But that was the problem. His first appearance was the best one. After that, it just didn't click with me. Killer Croc, okay, nothing really that great. Spellbinder, I was not expecting Spellbinder to be reintroduced in this series, and honestly, it was for the worst. The Batman Beyond Spellbinder still remains the best portrayal of Spellbinder. And an episode with Solomon Grundy that was interesting, but then you find out that it's not actually Solomon Grundy. And the reveal, honestly, I'm still conflicted about the way that episode ended. Because once you find out who's behind Solomon Grundy, I don't know, it feels like there wasn't enough setup for who was behind it that allowed me to accept who was behind it. I'm being cryptic about it, but honestly, it's a very good episode, all things considered. And I was always kind of down on the fact that it wasn't actually Solomon Grundy. I wanted actual betrayal of Solomon Grundy, although they made him skinny as all get out. But that was actually kind of cool too, because it's just like this super strong zombie that is massive in size and just this destructive juggernaut. It was kind of cool. And also Hugo Strange, who had a wildly different look about him. He almost looked like a kingpin with hair, basically. But he was very smart, very intelligent, and a lot of the involvement he had in the course of the series, very on brand for Hugo Strange. Now, this was the last appearance of Chief Rojas and Yindel. Well, I say Yindel because that's essentially the character is kind of based off of. A lot of people have agreed with that. It's the portrayal of Yindel. If you've ever watched The Dark Knight Returns, Yindel, yeah. But I always found it weird that mostly Yindel just kind of dropped off the face of the series. I always kind of assumed that she just kind of moved on for the most part. It was unfortunate. But there is an episode that says that in a future Gotham, that again kind of parodies to a certain degree bits and pieces of the Dark Knight Returns. She is police chief, or was it commissioner? Something along those lines. And so that's why I always kind of thought, okay, she is Yindel. Season 3 introduced Batgirl as she tried to become Batman's partner. And it wasn't Dick Grayson because uh, certain animated series had this whole thing of not wanting to portray multiple incarnations of one character. And since Teen Titan was going on at the same time as this, they didn't want to have two Robins and showing up in two different series and I guess confusing people, but I mean the way he's portrayed once you get to him in the series is just like, no, it's two different characters, two different portrayals. Now that we're in a time of multiverses and all that, you see just how silly that can be, but it was more confusing when you excluded a character that it made it seem like there was some connection, which would explain why the character didn't appear, which is why that confusion came up around the time of Justice League and all that, because it's just like, well, Robin not being there makes sense if he's on the Teen Titans and stuff like that. But the whole Barbara was a fun addition. She was very young, friggin' tween, like very young a child. People want to talk about Batman recruiting them young. It's especially blatant in this series. But it was some pretty cool stuff with her. She was fun enough. I remember not being as into the third season because some of the edge feels like it was taken off by this point. Barbara wasn't bad, but she wasn't as interesting as I would have hoped she'd have been. You had no yin to kind of ground a lot of things. And honestly, over the course of the series, they tried to make Barbara more older than she actually was. Well, at least appeared to be over the course of the series, which never sat right with me. As I think there was an episode where she actually was going to college and she still looked stupid young. Like, I remember that because I remember being just so confused. Like, she was getting ready to go off to college, and I guess maybe she might have been just smart for her age and all that, but even still, it felt like she just felt too young in the course of the series, which really kind of threw me. But you had the introduction of a new Batmobile, which was much better than the original that they had. They kind of cribbed the style of the animated Batman the Animated Series Batmobile, but it was such an interesting upgrade that I just kind of rolled with it. It still had all the blue weird markings and light up features and all that, but I don't know. I kind of dug it. And then you had the introduction of Poison Ivy, who also looked really young. Like, I don't know what it was about this series, but a lot of the female characters after a certain point just looked really young. And just not the best of characters, honestly. I'm looking through a list of a villain called Gearhead, who was okay. An updated version of Maxie Zeus, who, I mean, I've never been that big of a fan of Maxie Zeus. He's a joke. He's always a bit of a joke to me. Toymaker, who I hated his costume design. I just really hated his costume design. Prank, who was more of he tried to be a bit of a sidekick to the Joker, and I wasn't feeling that one either. He was a twerp. He was a friggin' twerp. This was the season that really made Hugo Strange a villain, but I don't know. I don't know what it was about this season that just didn't do it for me. Like, this was the point where I started to kind of lose a little bit of interest. Until the next season, because Teen Titans had concluded, they were able to introduce Dick Grayson, who, I swear to God, they keep making him look like Tim Drake, and it bothers the heck out of me. But the way they portrayed his parents' death, they just kept it 100. Like, his parents fell to their death. No stupid, they got shot while they were on the trapeze situation, no. Zuko takes some of the bolts from their trapeze so it's not secured, and they fall to their death. And it's just like, yo, no, that was not funny. It wasn't played for laughs whatsoever. It was pretty brutal of an ending for them. Like, well done for Tony Zuko. And they had Tony Zuko played by Mark Hamill, too. It's just like, of course, the most serious moment, you still had Mark Hamill. It was something else. It was something else, I gotta tell you. But, he's brought in a lot of stuff revolving around their relationship. Kind of gets ironed out to a certain degree. I feel as though Dick and Bruce ended up bonding a little too quickly over the course of that. I feel like there should have been a little bit more growing pains from that. I feel like he became skilled a little too fast for my taste. Especially when we had almost a whole season, basically a whole season of Batgirl trying to earn Bruce's trust. But I love the episode where we got to see the glimpse of things in the future with Nightwing, who didn't have the best design, but it was still really cool to see him in the actual episode. Barbara was wheelchair bound and it was Oracle, which was also kind of cool. Like, a lot of stuff from The Dark Knight Returns. And I guess what ended up throwing a wrench in some of the camaraderie that we should have had with Batman, Robin, and Batgirl was because they were starting to try to introduce members of the Justice League with the episode The Joining, having a whole alien invasion and all that. And so Batman was kind of invited to become a part of the Justice League of America. Not really the conclusion I wanted for the season, but there were some interesting characters introduced. You had Killer Moth, who was lame at first, and then they made him an actual moth creature in this. Oh no, they always make Killer Moth an actual moth creature in these series in order to make him intimidating, and it kind of works. Like, dude, giant mutant moth? I'm not fucking with that. Also, Black Mask, who was actually kind of intimidating in this series because they just gave him these wicked glowing red eyes that were really off-putting. This was actually my first introduction to Black Mask proper, because I don't think any of the seasons before actually had Black Mask, and he was a pretty decent mob boss. You had the character of Rumor, who would go around essentially capturing all of Batman's villains, and I loved it when they got free and went after his ass. Another not multiplex, because for some reason none of these series want to use multiplex. Teen Titans had Billy Numerous, and this series had Everywhere Man, another guy who could duplicate himself. Oddly enough, played by Brendan Roth. You know, the Atom or Superman, like, it was weird. They also introduced Harley Quinn in this season. And again, very skinny for some reason. She looked almost like an adolescent, especially when she had the outfit on. But here she's like a television psychiatrist, but she's still seduced by the Joker, and it's still an abusive relationship. It was like the first time I'd seen her someplace else besides Batman the Animated Series, and it kind of threw me for a second, because I'm just like, huh, weird. And then I learned of her origins, that she had only ever come from Batman the Animated Series, which made it doubly weird, because I'm just like, huh, that's odd. And she was voiced by Hendon Walsh, who usually voices Starfire, but then she just started voicing Harley Quinn in a lot of other stuff going forward. I mean, a lot of stuff. Like, if it's not Tara Strong, it's usually Hendon Walsh. Ethan was finally cured of his affliction, ultimately, which actually was pretty nice. I was glad once he got cured, because it was always a tragic situation with him, and it also gave them the opportunity to actually introduce Basil Karlo, the actual Glaves. And then Season 5 basically became Batman and Robin team up with the Justice League. You had Superman, Martian Manhunter, Green Arrow, The Flash, Green Lantern, Hawkman. It was kind of weird. Like, it was always team ups, and it wasn't bad. It was all the dudes of the Justice League. I'm like, why does the Justice League have no women in it? It was odd. And you saw less of Batgirl. This was the season where Batgirl went to college, and she still looked like she was 13. And it made me wonder how much time had passed. And it was the big Alien Invade finale. The finale of season 4 was the prelude, and this one was the whole shebang. And you had, of course you had a lot of their villains, like Lex Luthor, again voiced by Clancy Brown, just like in the Superman the Animated Series, but I don't know, just the way he looked, it wasn't my Lex Luthor anymore. He just looked too tiny, too slim, too skinny. And Mercy Graves, who, her design was a choice. Metallo, again, design was a choice. I'm sorry, I was not. It was too much too quickly when they started introducing some of the Justice League members and their villains in the Batman, because their designs just looked really wild to me. Count Vertigo was Shadow Thief, and the episode with Hawkman was also kinda It just, oh no, man, I was really kind of losing interest. You had the episode with Green Lantern that had Sinestro in it, and Batman wore the Green Lantern. That was kind of cool, but you didn't get a Green Lantern suit, and Sinestro really looked janky in this episode. Mirror Master also had this assistant, and he looked old. Like, I don't know why they kept making a lot of the bad guys look really old. They gave him white hair and stuff. Like, the only actual Batman villains you had were the Terrible Trio, who were portrayed as college students, and it was a wholesale different interpretation of the Terrible Trio, which, the episode with Wrath and his sidekick was actually pretty good, because he was like a mirror Batman, but not really that. They were he and his sidekick were a dynamic duo who helped villains, Wrath and Scorn, and they would try to stop Batman in order to help the villains, because they treated the villains like innocents, and that episode was actually pretty cool. And their alter egos had become friends with Bruce and Dick, and they ended up finding out each other's identities over time, and they were going to try to reveal their identities, but the Joker actually ended up gassing them so that it would never be found out, because he didn't want that, and that was very on brand for the Joker. And it's just like, it came back to bite them in the end. It was a very interesting portrayal of those two characters. I actually kind of liked that episode, because Wrath and Scorn were just as capable as Bruce and Dick, Batman and Robin. It was a very funky episode. And Phosphorus, who was, ever since she got Blight, nobody gives a shit about Phosphorus. I'm being real. Like, Phosphorus can take a walk. We got Blight now. Don't come back, man. So, ending with the Justice League wasn't bad. It just, you start to kind of lose what made the series fun, and that was Batman doing his thing. Once you brought in the Justice League, it just became Batman Brave and the Bold at that point, so just pack it up and give me Batman Brave and the Bold. Like, seriously. And I still love the earlier seasons of this series. I still deeply loved when it was introduced and it was new and it was exciting. I really dug it. But the moment they started just having other characters involved, it was just like, nah, man, you just kind of lost me. I would have preferred more Batman, Robin, Batgirl adventures than anything else. But for what it was a pretty solid series, and I don't know, I hope to see more from it, more love given to it in the future. I think it really is a slept on series and more people deserve to check it out. So if you sat through my ramblings up until now, tell me, what was your thoughts on The Batman? Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? Didn't even bother with it? And what was your favorite redesign? Mine still remains the Joker because it was a really interesting redesign. I don't want to see it all the time, but I really kind of liked it. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you like this video, please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. And until next time, I've been Duuz-Diz-Din, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.